Welcome, good afternoon to our biweekly CZ Net PI meeting. We got maybe 2 more to go this academic year, so hope you can make the next one. The notes are there in the chat, so take a look at those. A few things I want to remind you about. Once again, is to volunteer for the CZNet booth at the FIHM. If you or your students are going, it would be great to have that support. There was just a announcement of a call for papers on women in critical zone science. You see that up there linked in the reminders. So take a look at that, share it with your team. Deadline is for those papers is, I believe, the end of the calendar year. I think Jeff Monroe has some comments about potential social media support for your thematic clusters. So Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Hi, everybody. I'm just curious, or Jared and I are curious, how many of the different clusters, Lisa's represented by PIs here, have like a dedicated social media science outreach person. I'm really lucky with the Dust group. We have one who's also working with Julie on the big data group and is excellent. And he mentioned to me that his dream job would be to do this for the entire suite of clusters. And of course, that's not my decision. I was non-committal about that, but I thought the least I could do would ask and find out whether the other clusters are all set. Thank you very much. Have the perfect social media person already, or is this something that would be of interest to the other groups? So I don't want to take up too much time. Maybe people can just answer in the chat or something like that. But it could be useful to see kind of the lay of the land from the other 7 groups behind just Dust and big data. Sound good, Jared? We can just do it that way?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, I would just say that the person that's working with Jeff is awesome. I mean, I don't know if you follow any of this stuff on social media, but there's stuff out there all the time. Seems like Bedrock does a really good job, especially when they're in the field getting material out. But it's kind of a nice way to share resources with a person and, utilizing a person who's really good. I think, Julia, you've got experience with this person, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just second what Jeff said. Actually, Andrew came upon recommendation by Jeff, and it makes a huge difference. He does not only share content, he generates content, and he's very, very intentional about the outreach, about the values that underpin the type of outreach that we want to have. And it's really easy and amazing to work with.
Yeah, so thanks, Jared, for putting that on the agenda. Julie and I together can look at the comments and follow up with people.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Let us know if we can help. Okay, so next we're starting to think about an REU resubmission. And so Deanna McKay is here to talk to you about that for a few minutes.
All right, thank you. I'll try to be quick. It's nice to see everybody again. Just to get you up to speed on what's been happening, Ellen Berkowitz, who's from the Carey Institute, and I met with the REU program officers in early April to get a little clarity on a few of the reviewers' concerns, and then make an ultimate decision about whether we were going to revise and resubmit. We did get some clarity about the concerns related to cohort building with having a dispersed REU model, and then also ensuring good mentorship and good relationships between the mentors and the students. We feel like we have a good handle on that. We're ready to address that in a resubmission. We also discussed the concerns about the organizational structure of our proposed REU from last year. With this being a distributed REU, the organizational structure is much more complicated than a traditional REU. But we think we've come up with a reasonable solution to that challenge. So we are gonna, if we do resubmit, it'll be a collaborative proposal with Kawazi, the hub, taking the lead and having participant costs and the primary staffing go staffing support go through quasi. And the biggest concern we have that the reviewers had was the budget. And we still haven't fully wrangled that, but we're getting there. For those of you who have done REUs before, you know that the bulk of the money that is requested needs to go directly to the students as participant costs. They are very strict with the amount of money that we can request, and it basically should be no more than $13.50 per week per student. In our original proposal, we exceeded that by quite a bit, and the reviewers and the program officers didn't like that, but we're trying. The biggest challenge with a distributed REU model is more travel is required for the students. What we had proposed was we would bring all the students together at the beginning of the summer for an orientation to get them up to speed with critical zone science, for cohort building, and for building of professional skills. And then after they get together initially, they go off to the research site. So we have 10 students going to 10 different places across the US because, you know, we're spread out all over the place. Throughout the summer, the students would then get together virtually for professional development, to continue cohort building, and to continue bolstering their own knowledge and understanding of critical zone science. And then at the end of the summer, we want to get the students back together for an end of the year wrap up. So if you calculate this out, the students have 4 legs of trips that we have to pay for, plus room and board, plus a stipend at the research site. So this is a pretty hefty ask, and it's pretty hard to get it under the $13.50. So, you know, if it was a traditional REU, there would be 2 legs of travel. Students go from their home to the research site and back home at the end of the summer. But we feel really strongly that the students need to get together twice for cohort building, for professional skills, for understanding critical zone science. And we're just not willing to give that up in a resubmission. And we're scrutinizing our budget, we're trying. It was interesting to note, we asked the program officers about these distributed REU models, and they admitted that they fund very few because they are expensive and PIs just can't get it under the budget. So we've decided to trim the budget where we could. We're making some difficult cuts in terms of some of the support. We've cut the external evaluator, which I think is really regrettable, but we don't see any way around that. And we are going to try for resubmission. I know that many of you are eager to see a critical zone REU, and thank you for your support. We're trying to think outside the box. We're trying to think of creative ways to leverage the network, because there are so many of you, so many critical zone scientists that are enthusiastic. They want to support undergraduate research. And we think that this is really important for us to at least try once again. We are working with the critical zone RCN to see if we can work together to the benefit of the RCN and the benefit of the REU. And maybe partnering with them, we can help offset some of the student travel costs. But I'd also like you to consider ways that your clusters might be able to support the REU. We know that you have project mentors within almost all of the clusters. And of course, that support in and of itself, you all know that if you're a mentor for an REU, it's a labor of love. You're not getting paid extra to do it. You're doing it because you're committed to it. But if there's other ways that we can support the students through travel or stipends or any way that we can support the research in your clusters to bring down the participant costs, I would love to hear from you. And I will be probably reaching out to all of you individually just to hear your thoughts about ways that we might be able to be creative about this, leveraging the fact that we have so many scientists here doing work that are committed to this. So that's my short update. You'll probably be hearing from me soon, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have here.
I think Maddie will also be reaching out to you to gather your NSF PI documentation. So, you know, look for that, the usual CV and COA. And
right. Yeah, and that will be for the people who are volunteering to serve as mentors, particularly for the first year, and they will serve as senior personnel on the proposal like we did last year. So we're going to start pulling together all the documents yet again.
Okay, thanks. And your time frame on that, Deanna?
The deadline for submission, I believe, is August 24th. I would like to get everything buttoned up by August 1. So we're gonna put the gas on pretty aggressively over the next several weeks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next three things on the agenda are kind of all mushed together, really. So the CZ questionnaire, I was going to report back to you on that. There were about 160 plus responses to that questionnaire. And I think that the team that put that together is evaluating it. We are planning our CZ all hands meeting August 1 and 2, which is Monday and Tuesday of that first week of August, which is when most of you seem to be available. It will be at University of Delaware. Holly and her team tell me that based on vacation beach travel to and from the Delaware beaches, this is probably the best days of the week. We anticipate a meeting and maybe breakouts on August the 1st, and a field trip that will take most, if not all of the day on Tuesday. Is that right, Holly?
Yeah, probably most of the day, not the whole thing.
Yeah. So unless you're close, I wouldn't plan on travel home on Tuesday. Which then brings, and so also I am looking for feedback on an agenda. We anticipate at least a half a day breakout on data and data management. We would encourage you to maybe bring your data managers and 2 or 3 of your co-PIs. Based on kind of costs, we think we can handle 40 to 80 people without asking too much of a supplemental from NSF. We could handle it out of the hub budget. The other thing, though, that just came up is like at 1:15. So I had a conversation with Pam Sullivan related to convergence accelerators. And so, she and others have been working on this, and NSF has said that they would support a workshop around that paragraph that I just sent to you, and I copied that paragraph into the notes as well. And the workshop would be in the September-October timeframe, with a report out back to NSF in November. NSF would evaluate the report and other submissions, and potentially would fund or provide $32 million to support CZ Convergence Accelerator science, or projects rather. So the question is, are you interested in this? I mean, that's a pretty aggressive schedule. September, October, November, everybody's busy. And then, and that's more of a rhetorical question, I suppose, at this point. But then if you do support it, would you support sticking around for a half a day on August the 3rd, maybe just for the PIs, and everybody else can go home, but sticking around for a half a day to kind of brainstorm, workshop the workshop, put together ideas on what this workshop would look like and what it would address, to be held in the September-October timeframe. So Pamela and team need to submit a proposal to NSF for the workshop. And so our half a day meeting would inform that proposal. So at this point, I'd like to hear some feedback from you on whether you think this is a good idea, whether you would be able to stick around for a half a day on Wednesday morning to work with Pamela and others on this idea. Yeah, Claire.
So I think it's an interesting idea. It's kind of in part of my wheelhouse anyway. I'm interested. So what is the rush for September, October? Who's setting that date?
NSF.
Okay. I think if that is an absolute requirement, waiting until August 1st and 2nd is probably too late. If you're talking about inviting speakers and whatnot, I don't think you should wait that long. I mean, you could do details of an agenda August 1st and 2nd, but I mean, if this is about applying for a workshop grant and getting it and then inviting speakers and all that, it seems like it would have to be done well before that. Am I maybe off base about that? I don't know.
So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I don't think we anticipated, at least in my 15 or 20 minutes with Pamela before this meeting, we didn't anticipate inviting speakers on August the 3rd. We just said, okay, as this team of CZNet PIs, could we help provide information that would then inform the workshop, which would, at which there would be invited speakers.
Okay, so I'm misunderstanding what is the role of our group? To run the workshop or no?
No, to help inform a proposal to NSF on the workshop content.
Okay, and who will be leading that proposal?
As far as I understand, Pamela, but I don't know, Holly Barner, do you know differently?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in with just a little more context and timing, just because Pam and I have talked about this, and Julia, you might be able to fill in things that I'm missing. So no, the workshop proposal would be due relatively quickly, I think within the next couple months. So it's not developing a proposal for the workshop.
Gotcha.
And then, yeah, so Pam put in this convergence accelerator idea. She got contacted by NSF saying that there'd been only, I think, 2 or 3 convergence accelerators focused on water, and they were very excited about this focus on water and CZ science. And so I might have the numbers wrong, and Julia or someone else can chime in if I get them incorrect. But what I recall from my conversation with Pam is approximately 10 of these short paragraph proposals were selected to potentially do a workshop and to further develop the idea. From that, from the white paper / workshop summary document that comes out of this, approximately 5 would then be selected for being high priorities for convergence acceleration, which would be this injection of about 30 or 32 million towards this idea. That doesn't mean 32 million to the critical zone program, but NSF-wide, a focus on convergence and critical zone science. So to create opportunities, everything from education and outreach to science. So it's a really tremendous opportunity with obviously a short sort of fuse on it in terms of getting community members together and getting this white paper together as a result of the workshop. So that's sort of the big picture. Is it's a tremendous opportunity that's already been self-selected to some degree, and now we are just one part of this workshop. So I had not talked to Pam, sorry, and then Julia, you can have the floor, about this idea of after the PI meeting, but it could be a great opportunity, right? Because people do have limited time, that if there is some time for the PIs to come together and focus and create some messaging for the workshop, then that's what I would see as be the opportunity of sticking around a little longer. But
yeah,
anyway,
that makes sense compared to what I thought was implied. Okay, yeah.
Julia, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's really it, and it's exciting that that topic got selected as like, do you wanna have a workshop? And I wonder whether this would be a great opportunity also for folks that work on water in one way or the other from this group, have even more opportunities for synthesis across projects. I think this is something that at that time of the clusters we might start working towards. And so I'd be all for adding another half day to do that. But for me, it's easy because I just am like 2 hours flight away. So it's easy to say. But yeah, and related to this, I was just typing in the chat for all hand meeting agenda items. I think it would be helpful to define what the goal of that meeting is, like in a way of thinking what should be different after our all hands meeting from how it is right now. And then from there on can decide how we want to use those days. And I'd be happy to brainstorm around this.
So yeah, thanks for that clarification. You guys have been living this a little bit longer than I have, and so you have a better understanding. So, but to repeat, kind of the half a day would be to help think about what a workshop in September, October would look like. So yeah.
Yeah, and by that time, the dates would have already been selected and everything, right? And it would be.
Yeah, I don't know, but I presume that's the case.
Yeah, okay, all right, then that's helpful too. It would just be that sort of an add-on for content, I guess.
Yeah. Any other comments on that?
I think the Dryland team will be certainly interested. We're actually working on a couple proposals to USDA.
Okay.
So we would like to stay for half a day to brainstorm.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll work with Holly Michael's team on this to kind of help make it happen. Julia, I think in terms of your comment about what would be different, that's a really good framing question. I know that, Richard has been pushing for this for a long time. One of the things that he wants to happen is for the advisory committee to weigh in on the science that's being done at the thematic clusters. And so we will try to get as many of them there as we can. So that's what, I think that's one of his objectives. And so to some extent, it'll be a dog and pony show because the advisory committee is kind of halfway paying attention. And I hope that we will have their full attention for a couple of days. So, yeah. Okay, thanks. And sorry for taking up too much time on this, but we've got dust and dynamic water and geomicro to go. And so maybe if you guys could try to keep your talks to 10 minutes or so. Apologize for cutting into your time. So dust is Kevin, okay.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. But what we're looking at here is the dust squared. And so the data manager for that. There we go. So just a reminder, the dust squared is we're looking at dust, from the source region, characterizing source regions, characterizing the processes by which the dust is liberated, looking at the transport of that dust, and ultimately to receptor sites, both in the mountains and the impacts of that in the mountains and in the lakes and streams as well. And the urban part of this comes across from the fact that as that dust is transported across urban areas, the nature of the dust itself is modified. And so we have many different types of data streams that we'll be focusing in on. Starting off with dust to source characterization, we've got grab samples that we'll be taking from certain locations. We have gridded samples that'll be taken using incremental sampling methodology. And then we have a wide variety of passive sample collections as well from the BS&E and the MWAX samplers. And some of these are well set up for Caesar for identifying the identifiers for the things themselves. And we have other data streams associated with the dust source characterization. So we've got particle size distributions. We have elemental composition, which comes from ICP-MS mostly. We're doing a fair bit of strontium and neodymium isotope work. And then we're also looking at biological aerosols as well. So if we think about, where some of these have a natural home, EarthChem for, elemental composition and isotopes, it's set up well for that. A little bit less clear on looking at particle size distributions and biological aerosols, exactly where those data streams might end up. If we look at dust emission and transport, we have several different streams here. We have a PI swirl, which is essentially a portable wind tunnel device that we can take out to the playa to look at dust emission. We're establishing a National Wind Erosion Network site on the playa of the Great Salt Lake, and we'll be having a roaming one as well. But we also have modeling that will look at the emission of dust from source regions, the transport, and ultimately the deposition as well. Just taking a real quick look at the PI swirl. So the PI swirl is a device that has a rotating annulus that generates a known shear stress on the surface, and we can ramp that up to different RPMs. And as we do, the amount of dust that comes off is transformed. We can also look at saltation as well. This is not something that easily goes into EarthChem, so we'll have to figure out where else. Probably Zenodo being a catch-all for a lot of different data streams that are not well situated for some of the existing sites. For dust emission and transport, this National Wind Erosion Network site is an instrumented meteorological tower. So it has continuous meteorological measurements, wind speed, temperature. It also has information about saltating particles. It's got a rain gauge. It's got passive samplers. And then we're also going to be putting in on this tower additional instrumentation, including optical particle counters, complete radiation balance, UV radiation, albedo. And then we're going to be looking at soil properties as well, looking at soil temperature, soil moisture, salinity, those sorts of things. So that'll be real time, much of that, and we'll have modems which will be able to download that. And Zenodo is the choice where we plan to put that data. But how do we deal with the continuous data stream? That's one of the questions that we have, and how this network wants to deal with that. So for example, the National Wind Erosion Network site has GUIs which are set up to take that data and make it available in real time for users, for the general public. And that is, we intend to use this interface to post our data in real time, but we'll also have to archive that data permanently along the way as well. And then when it comes to dust emission and transport, so here we have models. So codes that we're going to have are going to be model implementation codes. We're using a combination of the WRF model, the STILT model, and the CMAP model. And all of these have 2D output grids that are NetCDF format. The STILT trajectories, are zip files using the R code. The WRF model for case studies would have to include all the output for all the meteorology that goes along with that. And then we also have dust source footprints, which are being saved as NetCDF. And we have a fair amount of data that's going to be generated from these modelings, more than 10 terabytes probably. So that's another issue as well. Zenodo being a likely source for this as well. At our dust receptor measurement sites, we have snow, we've got lakes and streams, we've got the National Atmospheric Deposition Network, and then we have mountainous regions where we're doing receptor sites as well. If we look at the snow, we have, basically collecting the dust that's collected on the snow, doing grain size elemental, strontium isotopes, deposition fluxes. We also have real-time meteorological data. We also have drone measurements of snow depth and the spectral reflectance. And then we also have satellite remote sensing products looking at the albedo and the reflectivity or enhanced absorption at the surface using the MODIS satellite as well. So the first part there matches our dust source measurements, which would be on EarthChem. The rest of this is probably Zenodo. And if we look at our dust receptor measurements continued, Janice Brahney up at Utah State has essentially weekly and dry and wet deposition measurements. looking at elemental composition, isotopes of nitrogen and phosphorus, looking at microplastics, and also looking at microbial species. And the microbial frequencies, relative frequencies of microbial species is something that is quite complex. We also have researchers at BYU, which are doing the same sort of thing for characterizing dust emission areas as well. Earth chems and Odo, and I'm not sure where we're going to be dealing with the microbial frequency stuff yet. And then if we look at lakes and streams, we're going to have measurements of temperature and pH, elemental composition, chlorophyll A, and strontium and neodymium isotopes. Hydroshare is our intended location for our lake and stream data. And in our mountainous regions, we have a lot of passive samplers in these mountainous regions. And once again, we're trying to mirror the types of measurements that we had at the source sites, including grain size, composition, added in mineralogy and depositional fluxes as well. Earth chem for some of these, and grain size, mineralogy, unclear exactly where that's going to be going yet. And just to summarize it up, we've got lots and lots of different types of data streams that don't necessarily mesh nicely with Earth chem and Hydroshare. And we still want some feedback on how other groups are dealing with continuous real-time data and archival of that. And we also want some clarity on sharing data with other networks along the way. So, for example, Janice Brainey's work could easily be part of the National Atmospheric Deposition Project. We're establishing a National Wind Erosion Network site. And so there's multiple ways to present that data for the public and for archival. And then there's some other things that we might have to deal with behind the scenes with dealing with CSAR. Metadata vocabulary doesn't necessarily work well for some of our sample types along the way. I'm just trying to keep it short.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. So any questions here for Kevin?
Kevin, this is Jeff. It would be really nice to follow up on some of these issues that you talked about where the metadata aren't maybe meeting your expectations, or you're not sure whether things are fitting in Hydroshare. Mm-hmm. I suspect that there may be some talking we could do to maybe allay some of those issues, but until we have a little more detailed conversations.
Yep.
Yeah. So we can do those on the Wednesdays, or we can find another time if those Wednesday calls aren't working for you. That'd be great.
Well, they didn't work because I was teaching class at the time, but now
yeah,
they're over.
Yay!
Anybody else? Okay, Eric?
Yeah, so give me 1 second, my PowerPoint. All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, what were the data?
We see your speaker notes, Eric.
Oh, okay, I don't want to show that. Click add notes. Wait, why isn't it going the right one? Hang on. Share screen. There. Does that look better?
Yes, that looks good.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So, the data, that's my starting point. So my name is Eric Parish. I'm the data manager with the Dynamic Water Critical Zone Group. I'm going to adjust my things a little bit. To tell you about me, in addition to managing our data, I also work on the science communication, E&O, and GIS. And part of the Dynamic Water Critical Zone Group, I was at the Boulder Creek CZO since its inception in 2008. Within the BCZO, I had roles, but gradually became increasingly involved with the data and the data management team. I also played roles in development of the old CZO website, including the data pages. Today, I play an active role in the CZNet data group as well as the E&O group. Who we are, in case you didn't know, the Dynamic Water Cluster has 5 locations where data is collected, as seen here in this map, and our cluster has 6 primary institutions. The history, when we started a new project, Dynamic Water Group, we didn't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel for our data. And so some of the current Dynamic Water data and structure and data management infrastructure was inherited from the BCZO program. These BCO data and data systems have been developed and maintained independently from the main CZO program. However, with the new dynamic water group cluster, we also wanted to get a fresh start where we could. So when we transitioned, we let go of many of the tools that we built in the BCZO with the idea it would be a more coordinated, unified approach with the overall CZNet program. We also wanted to remove data interface redundancy and make clear make it clear to users the data they were getting and where to get it. Based on my experience with the BCZO and now the Dynamic Water Group, I'm advocating for the use of this centralized repository and strengthen our data holdings, increase and maintain longevity, and create connections in sharing data and research. The Dynamic Water Group seeks to unify with the other clusters under the Hydroshare umbrella, for example, and because in hindsight, originally, the organically fragmented data groups of the CZO were problematic in the CZO program. With these new clusters, we have the opportunity to see what develops and its new centralized interface. As mentioned, I have the roots in the BCZO with the Dynamic Water Cluster, the advantage of having some of those in-house infrastructures and network in place. Our current data process is fairly straightforward. We collect the data in the field manually or remotely via repeaters and wireless network. Depending on the site and its proximity to the various universities and partners, we then use Dropbox to archive, store, and process the data. The Dropbox is a shared space internally, and with all our files are archived there as long as funding is sustained. This Dropbox system also is proving to be useful as a common workspace for data contributors and first-run organizational tools. To process the data, we have the following procedures. In process and ongoing data streams, we have primarily used Python, and during this process, all data goes through a QA/QC process. This is completed approximately once a month, and then data gets a second verification before going to its final destination, typically on Hydroshare. Of course, as we evolve, we continue to look for better and more efficient ways to go about our data management. We generally have two types of data products: continuous data streams from field instruments, and project-based data that is dependent on other researchers and their research questions. This collaborative process, and generally in the collaborative process, the researchers do the QA/QC. However, I will then work with them to ensure the data is in the correct format, etc. And then find out which resource we need to put it into. The data sets are more than likely to be subject for embargo periods and have delayed release dates since the researchers are using the data for specific project and publications. We make every effort to get the data up as soon as we can. For all data products, we try to make the data clean as possible and use a naming conventions and organizational process that's internally consistent. Being that most data sets are time series, we mainly use traditional CSV file formats for ease and accessibility for end users. These CSV formats can then be fed directly into systems like databases, Python, MATLAB, R, and RStudio, and even Excel right out of the box. Our products are data, metadata, and additional files. Each product has at least these three components. Our data is mostly time series data again, and it follows the aforementioned process and format. Multi-component metadata for ease internally and for end users is currently nested in Excel. However, as we experiment with Hydroshare, we're interested in pursuing different approaches for creating and maintaining supplemental information for the data. The weekly data meetings hosted by the Hydroshare have already spurred several developments by Hydroshare Quasi team that may better integrate workflow and products. A quick word about metadata. If no metadata exists, we of course will create that metadata. If the data is project-based or external to our ongoing data collections, we have forms that we have the data holders fill out. The dynamic group initially used the BCZO metadata format, which as a starting point for consistency. The metadata format follows a robust format originally proposed by Mark Williams et al. For the LTRs. And although slightly modified, the current metadata format is still close to what is used by EDI and the LTRs today. For other data types, we look for similar standard formats. We believe these metadata formats are flexible to modify our metadata to whatever standard Hydroshares may require going forward. In addition to that basic metadata, we provide other supplemental background information where possible. For example, we keep what's called a log of what's happening to a given sensor on the ground. For example, the log would include the sensor status and routine maintenance. These logs are kept in a separate file from the data, but are available in the same Hydroshare resource. Here's an example of our Hydroshare entry. We use a 3-tiered naming convention to keep our data related sets organized. The 3 levels are similar to grandparent, parent, and child. Each of these tiers are given an ID that ties it to its family. They can then be nested accordingly in the data repository. And here's the example on Hydroshare. One of the goals here is to minimize the number of resources and to group directly related data sets such that we can create a hierarchy that can more easily be understood and navigated. Also makes tracking data and data locations and relationships very simple. In the Hydroshare, to maximize these aspects of our data, we utilize the flexibility of Hydroshare system to enhance navigation and discoverability. Naming conventions include cluster, state, site, subsite, family, and type. Key components of the resource include, but are not limited to, data, metadata, location, date, variables, keywords, related resources, funding source, and linking to related data sets. Linking data is currently linked into the abstract itself or the new recently added related location entry below. Since this latter is relatively new, we have been a little inconsistent in the format here, but are working to be more so moving forward. Discoverability and accessibility are our main goals. As a side note, we are also using the collections to organize resource by site and hopefully make it easier for users to navigate the resources. Here's a list of ongoing and available data products, as well as some upcoming data sets and data streams. Once again, we have dominantly had 2 types of data. The project-based acquisitions are time limited and predict this data, as mentioned, will be more directly tied to publications, that we'll see more embargoes and the data following the requirements set forth by the CZNet program. And here we'll probably see also the largest use of DOIs. The other data type we have is ongoing data streams. Currently, they're mostly coming out of Gordon Gulch near Boulder, Colorado, but other sites are planned. These data streams will be ongoing and updated regularly. As described earlier, there will be no embargoes placed on this data. The clusters would benefit from the following. I call it my Hydroshare wish list. We would like to see better branding for CZ group visibility, better development of Hydroshare groups and communities, listing, filtering, and discoverability made more parsable and accessible, easier previews of data sets to determine relevance, and easier ways to find related data, for example, within a cluster or across clusters. Better maps for discoverability and better maps for discovering related data and other potential data of interest. I have discussed all of these topics with Jeff and Clara on Hydroshare team. Some of these topics have also come up in data meetings. The Hydroshare group has always been responsive, and they are concerned not only with the cluster needs, but also what will going to be useful to the larger group and communities. Hydroshare provides the CZ cluster with a great opportunity to share our data and build a better system. Hydroshare has a strong foundation that has been built and developed over the last decade that we should be looking to utilize to better promote our CZ community. I hope the individual CZ clusters recognize the opportunities provided to us to disseminate our data on Hydroshare and its partners. Now is our chance to shape the direction of Hydroshare and its partners the way they might take with our data. It seems to me that the parts and the resources available in Hydroshare and its partners address the needs of the CZ groups. In fact, many of the wish list items here are actually already underway, while others on the list would require development. And history, Hydroshare, we've been mistaken not to use this opportunity to organize our data in useful ways and perhaps even build some tools that meet our needs. One major priority we need is a better map interface. Interactive maps are powerful tools to browse data with a geospatial interface. And since there's a geospatial aspect to almost everything we do, being able to visualize the physical relationships between the different sites, data, etc., is critical. In addition to interactive map, interactive maps significantly open the doors to data discoverability. Recently, we learned about a new map interface feature, however, is not yet fully functional and needs further development to optimize its usefulness. I bring this up because I think interactive maps is better, and a better map interface could be a major priority for us. I want to note, we do recognize these types of interfaces are not easy to build, and they're different levels of sophistication and functionality. Hydroshare currently has begun to build an interactive map interface with full power, but with the full power Hydroshare system behind it, this interface could be built into a massively powerful tool. Another basic option to create an map interface would be for Hydroshare to provide a specialized map resource where the clusters could just simply build their own KML and upload it into the map. In this case, the power and complexity of the interactive map would depend on the builder, but no matter the complexity of the model, a lot could be done. I personally think that further development on a tool like this would take Hydroshare to the next level. This is a game-changer in the interrelationships of resources and how users can interact with them. We are always looking to our PIs and users and ways to improve our data holding tools that we might develop to enhance and use in the functionality of our data. We want our data to have value. CZ Science stands for integration, and our data holdings need to reflect that philosophy. In this way, our data will have more value. And then finally, Hydroshare has a lot of potential and for the CZ clusters, and I think it's continuing to develop to try to meet the needs of the group. And I do hope our input is useful. There's a lot of work here and plenty to learn, but we need to come together to make it happen. I also think having a uniform experience for data providers, data managers, and the users is critical as we move forward. We have a great start, and I'm excited to see what develops. Thank you.
Yeah, so great. Thanks, Eric. That's really good. I think, you know, one message I hope you got from Eric was these data help sessions can be valuable. And so if you're not checking those out, it might be worth checking out at least once. So let's see. Derek, I think you're up.
Spot here. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Title screen there. Okay, so I'm part of the geomicrobiology group. I'm the data management group, though it's kind of a shared team effort at this point. I can't take all the credit. There's a couple of other great postdocs and PIs, and everybody's kind of chipping in on the data front. We're at, I think, an earlier stage than some of the other groups. A lot of our site installations have occurred across the last 4 to 6 months. And we're seeing sensor data come back from those sites, but we aren't really hands-on with too much of the lab data. So we sampled soils and whatnot, and a lot of that data has gone off, or those samples have gone off to the lab. And then we're you know, having conversations, we're preparing to what we should be tracking and what we're going to get back, and kind of getting ready for this onslaught of data we're going to get. But at this point, we're still kind of in this planning stage. But I thought I'd take the time, and I'll try to be quick today, just to roll through our approach to how we're going to handle especially kind of the synthesis and visualization piece for our project. So a little background, we have 5 sites where we're doing both cross-site and within-site comparisons of kind of truly soil biogeochemistry, where we're really, we're measuring characteristics of the soil profile, we're measuring soil microbiology, soil chemistry in a variety of different ways, and a number of complex analyses. So we're really collecting as much information as we can across a number of soil pits that are stratified by different things like aspect and soil type within a site. And then we're going to get as well kind of go broad across the sites to see what relationships and mechanisms seem to you know, stay the same or differ across these diverse sites. Like I said, that's a variety of data. Watching the other data managers present, I don't think we're quite at the extreme that they are and how much they're collecting. We really have kind of break down into some basic groups of soil classification data, like you would expect in a soil morphology class. We have sensor data, both for climate and gas efflux. We have a variety of elemental analysis and structural and physical analyses for soil chemistry, some soil mineralogy things, you know, as well as particle size, you know, some commonalities with the other groups. And then soil microbiology, I put that in red. That's the one that I not sure yet exactly where that fits. I think everything else, I'm familiar with storing that kind of data on EarthChem and Hydroshare. I don't see any problems there, but things like sequence data and microbial community classifications and things that I haven't done it before. Maybe maybe we can figure that out, but I have a feeling, especially the sequence data, we're probably looking to put that somewhere else. So all in all, I think that's really good. I think that's hats off to EarthChem and Hydroshare that it doesn't feel overwhelming to take this much data and load it up and share it through those platforms. Looking ahead, like I said before, I think this is the calm before the storm, where we're about to just be flooded with data from all the different labs. The separate data sets is really the challenge, is that we really need to be able to join everything together. The crux of this whole study depends on synthesizing, aggregating and aligning all of the data from these different sites, from the different labs on different, properties. It's a very multidisciplinary study, and we've got to be able to put all of that together in a way that aids the analysis for the PIs and the graduate students. So the real wrinkle that's different about our project, where we're working something in and building off of some of Eric's comments, is to deal with the synthesis challenges and the visualization challenges. We're going to build upon the soil data harmonization framework, which is a project I was on as part of my dissertation, and it was really about synthesizing data across all of these different experimental networks. And it provides us with kind of an easy way to pick up the tools that were generated for this project and put them to use again for our geomicrobiology group. So the original project was really similar to our own, where it was a little bigger in scale, but we just had a huge number of data sets across different scales, different methods, data coming in from different labs with different nomenclatures, and really trying to figure out how do we put all this together so it makes sense and it's not just gobbledygook. And we knew in doing that we just would never have the hands-on manpower to really sit down and work through that stuff ourselves. So we needed to develop this kind of scripted, repeatable, extensible framework for processing data. Two of my partners on the project, I have to shout out to them, of course. It was another great team effort with me and Will and Stephen. And it's really pretty simple idea, though I imagine you could all understand the intricacy of it, but it's really, how do you take a mountain of Excel files, come up with a way to catalog them? In this case, we use what we call a key file to essentially ID what's in each Excel file and make sense of it. So if you have a column, what is that column? And then put it into the terms of what we want our synthesized database to look like. So those key files end up storing metadata, basics of, kind of who created the data, when and where, and then it's split into site level, plot level, sample level, soil depth level, and then soil fraction. So we have all of these different layers we can then collect data from and allow us to homogenize everything. All of that data that comes in, we can kind of classify it according to how we want the database to come out the other side. And that's what we eventually produce for each data set, a harmonized data file. And it's at that step that since once everything becomes harmonized, it's really easy to put it through some really basic QA, QC scripts, things I call sanity checks, just to make sure you're in the right order of magnitude, things like that, which can be very handy. Make sure you're not missing data, things like that. And then finally, with all those harmonized data files, once they're kind of checked off as appropriate and ready to go, we can easily merge all of those together. And then with the harmonized data set is really where we can begin to really do visualizations in a much easier manner, because everything's coming in a uniform fashion with the uniform nomenclature, uniform units, all the data's there that we expect. It allows us to build web applications where we can show the data and allow people to mess around with it. So a couple of these figures are from the original study. What we're doing now is really what I'm calling SOTA, the acronym for the project, version 2.0. So I had an opportunity during my postdoc to build another database in the same fashion for the Reynolds Creek Observatory, which is part of the geomicrobiology cluster. It's one of the sites. And now we're kind of building off of that footprint to load in all of the geomicrobiology data. And this is what the web looks like in person. Kind of feeding back to what Eric's saying is these maps are extremely powerful tools. And with our database, we're able to load all of this in and, all the way from different raster layers, different sensor networks, kind of you name it, it's whatever we want to do. And then we can go further and we have tabs where we can plot data, where we can track our sensor data, where we can include all our metadata, where we have our data tables where people can filter and download things, resource tabs. It becomes very flexible. This is all built on R Shiny and currently hosted by the Agricultural Research Service. It's all locked behind a password, and we expect it to stay that way through the project until publication time. Like I said before, we're still planning to archive all of our data as individual products through EarthChem and Hydroshare and whatnot, but then we'll have this extra database that hopefully we can link those archive products. We can provide the link to this database in the end and allow users to come here and find everything. In terms of furthering Hydroshare and EarthChem in some of the data management meetings, I think this is very similar to the directions that those platforms are heading, and hopefully provides a great opportunity to work together and find synergies. SODA right now doesn't have the manpower or the resources behind it that Hydroshare and EarthChem do. It's a small group. And is something that I feel like could die any day and you'd never see another database like this again. That's certainly not my hope, but I think it's potentially the best thing that could come out of this is the lessons we've learned in building this type of synthesized database and web application. If we can help inform and bring that over to Hydroshare in whatever capacity, that would be a huge win. Along those lines, we still have challenges. Certainly don't have it all figured out. We're approached with new data types and new things we have to add to the database all the time. Again, I just don't know that sequence data is ever going to fit in this type of database. But for the most part, we're able to handle most everything that we can archive. We can also put into the synthesized database. The true challenge is still with aligning data and averaging data. So if somebody needs, plot level data, but it has so many reps, and then what to do about, well, it was sampled at 6 different depths, and, allowing people to figure out how to summarize that data properly and get the data at the level they need out of the application is still something that's just too tenuous. It's too fraught with potential errors that are behind the scenes that the data users wouldn't even know that the data came out wrong, that it's the scariest part of the whole process. It's pretty easy to provide raw data. It is much, much harder to provide aligned and aggregated, average summarized data. So something hope to improve because we are doing so many things the same way and with so much planning through this project, we think we can pull it off, but definitely the tough part that down the road, as you start to go through these things, that's a problem we've had for years, and it continues to be the most difficult challenge. Okay, hopefully I made it. Yep, right on time.
Great, thanks, Derek. So one takeaway I took from that is that there's seems to be a lot of opportunity for sharing some of these, algorithms for sanity checks, and the algorithms for visualization, the Shiny apps, and so on. And so hopefully we can have those conversations either in the data help sessions or at the all hands meeting in August. So thank you all for hanging in there. I will send out an email just reminding you about the all hands meeting. Looking forward to seeing you there, and also in 2 weeks for the last of our data sessions. So thank you and have a good rest of the week.